Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're going to completely change the way you look at grammar. I want you to go ahead and just forget about those dusty rulebooks and boring syntax drills for a minute. Instead, I want you to imagine yourself as a film director. Every single time you write a sentence, you are holding a camera, and you, and only you, get to decide exactly where your audience looks. Are you focusing on the hero of the action, or are you panning the camera over to the dramatic result? That right there is the true power of grammatical voice. Okay, let's dive into this and see how you can master your own director's camera.
So here's our roadmap for today. We'll be covering directing the sentence, flipping the script, the missing agent, choosing the right tone, and finally, building the bigger picture. Let's get right to it. Section 1. Directing the sentence, setting the focus.
Directing your sentence is really all about setting the focus. The absolute fundamental question you've got to ask yourself every time you put pen to paper is who or what is actually performing the action in this sentence. To answer that, we just need a little core terminology, and honestly, it's quite simple. When we use the active voice, our camera is pointing straight at the doer of the action. The doer is driving that sentence forward. But when we use the passive voice, we swing the camera around to focus on the receiver of the action, the thing that was affected. And in grammar terms, we call the doer of the action the agent. Understanding these three terms gives you total control over your sentence's energy.
Let's see this in action. Take a look at the text on the left. The professor explained the lesson clearly. Here, our camera is locked squarely on the professor, our agent, who's actively doing the explaining. But check out the right side. In the passive voice, we say, the lesson was explained clearly by the professor. We literally pan the camera. Suddenly, the lesson itself takes center stage. The professor is still there, sure, but they've been pushed way into the background, introduced by that little word by. It's the exact same event, but with a totally different focus.
Section 2. Flipping the script. How to move the camera.
So, now that we know what this camera does, how do we actually move it? Flipping the script and shifting your voice isn't some kind of magic trick. It's a simple, super logical procedure that literally anyone can master. Here's your 4-step formula for smoothly switching from active to passive without losing your tense. Step 1. Identify your original subject, your verb, and your object. Step 2. Take that object and just move it right to the front of the sentence. Step 3, and this is absolutely crucial, add the correct form of the verb to be while keeping your original tense, followed by the past participle of your main verb. And finally, Step 4, add the word by and place your original subject, the agent, right at the end. Let's test those steps on a real piece of history. Look at the active version. Alexander Fleming discovered penicillin in 1928. Fleming is the absolute star here. But if we follow our formula, we move penicillin to the front, add was discovered, and drop Fleming at the end, giving us the passive version. Penicillin was discovered by Alexander Fleming in 1928. And this brilliantly illustrates why we even have the passive voice. Because let's say you're writing a medical history book. The invention of penicillin is probably way more important to your narrative than the scientist himself, right? The passive voice lets you highlight the medicine. And the camera easily moves in reverse too. Check out the passive sentence on the right. The book was written by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. It feels just a little bit clunky, right? If we want to really pull this famous author into the spotlight, we just reverse the whole process. We pull the agent from the end of the sentence, completely drop that to be verb, and make it active. Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie wrote the book. Bam! The sentence is instantly punchier and so much more alive.
Section 3. The missing agent. Who did it?
Okay, but what happens when the doer of the action completely pulls a disappearing act? It's time to put on our grammar detective hats. Picture this. You walk into a coffee shop, you look at your table, and you just gasp. Your computer is gone. You yell out to the room, "Who stole my laptop?" It's a highly relatable, incredibly stressful situation. But grammatically, it presents a really unique problem. You've got an action, a stolen laptop, but you have absolutely no idea who the agent is.
Now, if you try to force an active sentence here, you end up with what's on the left. Someone has stolen my laptop. I mean, it's technically correct, but saying someone is literally useless information. We know someone did it. This is exactly where the passive voice becomes your best friend. By shifting to the right, my laptop has been stolen, you can completely drop that totally unknown agent. You focus entirely on the tragedy of the missing computer, which is, let's be honest, all that actually matters in this moment.
That missing laptop actually teaches us a golden rule of the passive voice. You can and absolutely should drop the agent in 3 specific scenarios.
First, when the agent is unknown, just like our mysterious thief. Second, when the agent is overwhelmingly obvious to your audience. And third, when the agent is just flat out unimportant to the story you're trying to tell. Deleting the agent like this, it makes your sentences so much punchier and way more efficient.
Here's a perfect real-world example of dropping a totally obvious agent. Look at the left side. The thief was arrested by the police yesterday. Well, yeah, of course it was the police. Who else goes around officially arresting thieves? Plumbers? Bakers? Because the agent is so incredibly obvious, including by the police just clutters up the whole sentence. On the right, we've got the much cleaner, punchier version. The thief was arrested yesterday. See how much better that flows?
Section 4. Choosing the right tone. Context is everything.
All right, we've nailed down the mechanics, so let's shift over to strategy. Why do politicians, scientists, and journalists intentionally choose different voices? Well, because in writing, context is everything. Let's say you're a teacher and you have to deliver some bad news. You could use the active voice on the left. The student made mistakes in the calculation. That's direct, for sure, but it clearly points a rather aggressive finger right at the student. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the right side. Mistakes were made in the calculation. Notice how the passive voice here acts like this perfect diplomatic shield? By dropping the agent, you state the facts without assigning any direct blame. It's a classic move. You'll see politicians and PR teams using this exact trick every single day.
But context completely flips when we jump over to academia. In just a general active conversation, we might say, the researcher conducted the survey carefully. But in a formal scientific paper, we want to emphasize the objective methodology, definitely not the individual person in the lab coat. So we shift to the passive. The survey was conducted carefully. The crucial takeaway here is that the passive voice makes information sound formal, objective, and wonderfully detached, which is exactly what good scientific writing demands.
Section 5. Building the bigger picture. Shaping the story.
Up to this point, we've really only been looking through the lens of single, isolated sentences. Let's zoom out a bit to see how stringing these voices together shapes your entire story at the paragraph level. Read this short text with me. Scientists conduct many important experiments every year. They test new medicines on animals first. Notice how punchy and direct that feels? Because it's leaning heavily on the active voice, it sounds like an engaging, general story. The camera is locked right onto the scientists and the work they're actively doing.
Now watch what happens when we shift that exact same information into the passive voice over on the right. Many important experiments are conducted every year. New medicines are tested on animals first. The content is 100% identical, but wow, the tone has totally transformed. It instantly feels heavier, far more formal, and highly objective. It shifted right from a story about people into a formal scientific report about the experiments themselves.
Let's move to the next example and see how this builds in the exact opposite direction. Sometimes academic writing gets so bogged down in the passive voice that it'll literally put you to sleep. Look at the left. The data was collected. Recommendations were made. It's incredibly stiff, right? But we can wake it right up by injecting active subjects. Check out the right side. Researchers collected data. They made recommendations. Boom. Suddenly there's a human element driving the narrative again.
Ultimately, guys, grammatical voice is not just some set of rigid rules you have to memorize. It's a palette of creative choices. The active voice brings the energy, the doer, and the action. The passive voice sets the stage, shifts the focus, and completely controls the tone. You are the director holding the camera. So my challenge to you today is this. The next time you sit down to write an email, a report, or an essay, take control. If the active voice brings the action and the passive voice sets the stage, how will you direct your next sentence?